most of the time.
On the subject, right, if we started, um, Gail told me next year that whatever class I have to take, it has to be a full year-long class, but she told me I can take all of it.
Yeah, because you can take college algebra. It is a single semester, but it's college classes count different. Because you could talk to her and see if just the one semester college algebra counts, and I think it should, because it's a full class. Yeah, college classes only are from August to December, and then different one from January to May. All right, guys. This is where we left off yesterday using the quadratic equation or quadratic formula. 5x squared equals x plus 8. We need to get this equation equal to 0 for us to be able to use the quadratic equation. So what can we do to get this equation equal to 0? So we can subtract 8 from both sides. Yep. So we can subtract 8 from both sides. So instead we have 5x squared minus 8 is equal to x. And then we would need to minus x from both sides, telling us that 5x squared minus x minus 8 is equal to 0. Questions on how we got to 5x squared minus x minus 8 equals 0. So what's our value of a? 5. Our value of b would be -1, and c is -8. X is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus, I'm second guessing that, yeah, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now at this point here we can plug in our value, so negative, our value b is -1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, -1 squared minus 4 times our a value, which is 5, times c, which is -8, all over 2a, which would be 2 times 5. Questions on this so far? That's probably way too much. Now let's look at the first one, our -1. Well, -1 is 1. Plus or minus 2 times 5 is 10. Now the next thing we can do is simplify what's inside our radical. -1 squared minus 4 times 5 times -8. Parentheses, -1 squared minus 4 times 5 times -8 is 161. Any questions on how we got to this point here? Are you ready? Well, the last thing we need to do is check and see if the square root of 161 reduces. It does not. There's nothing in common. There are no like terms. There's nothing we can reduce. So that there is our final answer. Questions on this here? We're ready for the next one. (25x squared minus 8x is equal to 12x minus 4. So we need to get this equal to 0 first. What's the first thing we can do to get this equation equal to 0? Plus 4. We can add 4 to both sides. which will tell us that we have 25 x squared minus 8x plus 4 is equal to 12x. What can we do next? We can minus the 12x, which will tell us that we have 25x squared. Well, our negative 8x minus 12x is negative 20x, plus 4 is equal to 0. Now, the order in which we do these doesn't really matter, because we could have added the 12 or subtracted the 12x first, then added the 4, or done it this way here. Doesn't matter as long as everything ends up being on the same side. A, B, C. Our value of A is 25. Our value of B is negative 20, and our value of C is positive 4. X is equal to negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So negative. So our value B is negative 20. Plus or minus the square root of negative 20 squared minus 4 times our A value, which is 25, times 4 all over 2 times A, 2 times 25. Well, negative 20 is 20. 2 times 25 is 50. Now we need to plug everything inside the radical into the calculator. Well, we can do it in the calculator, we can do it by hand. So negative 20 squared minus 4 times 25 times 4. And this gives us, all right guys, 0. Now we can take the square root of 0. Because the square root is just finding out what times itself. So what times itself is 0. Yep. Now realistically, we do have two expressions with this here. Because we can say x is equal to 20 plus 0 over 50. Well, what is 20 plus 0? And 20 does divide by 50. So x is equal to 2/5. We have one last thing to do. 20 minus 0. Still 20. Which is just telling me that x is still 2/5. Questions on this here? So even though we do have we have two answers, they both end up being 2/5. They end up being the same answer. And that really came from the fact that what's inside the radical was 0. Questions on this here before we look at the next one? We ready for the next one? Negative x squared plus 4x equals 13. What can we do to make this be 0? Exactly. we can minus 13 from both sides. A, B, C. A is -1 because we want the number in front of x squared. B would be 4, and C is -13. X is equal to -b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, negative, our b value is 4, plus or minus square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times our a value, which is -1, times our c value, which is -13. All over 2 times a, 2 times -1. Well, -4 is just, well, -4. The denominator 2 times -1 is -2. We'll put our radical. Now we do need to simplify our 4 squared. Minus 4 times -1 times -13 is -36. Now we can reduce the square root of -36. Because the negative is going to come out as I. Because anytime we have a negative inside the square root, it's going to come out as I. Now what that leaves us with is the square root of 36. And the square root of 36 is 6, which tells us the square root of -36 is indeed 6i. Questions on this here? All right. Now we have a few things happening here because we can reduce this. As we can reduce all three of these terms by a factor of 2. So if we did the division like we did the other day, well, -4 divided by 2 is -2. Our 6 divided by 2 is 3i, and -2 divided by 2 is -1. We can't just get rid of the 1 because it's not positive, it is negative. Now we can simplify it, it just means I have to take that negative and distribute it through the top. Which means the -2 is going to become +2. We will still have our 3i, but the positive in this plus or minus is going to become minus. And the minus is going to become a so the plus and minus switch to plus and minus. Because the minus became plus, the plus became minus, so it just flipped. That's the nice thing with plus and minus. It just switched, it's still plus minus. Questions on this here? Now, the main reason we had this negative in the bottom of the fraction, this issue with that, is because the value of a is what? negative. Goes over 2a. That negative being with a caused an issue. Now, this isn't really changing anything that we do, but instead of leaving it as this here, I can multiply or divide by negative 1. Because if we do this, well, the negative x squared becomes positive x squared. The positive 4x becomes negative 4x. Our negative 13 becomes positive 13. So all this is done is just taken the values of a, b, and c and flip them from positive to negative or negative to positive. Okay. Now in our formula, let's see here, let's use red. Let's change that to negative 4. This is now positive 1. This is now positive 13. Let's see if that changes anything. Well, the negative 4 is now positive 4. Our 2 times 1 is now 2. Let's see how it affects inside the parentheses. So we'd have negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 13. Last time it gave us negative 36, yes? Let's see what it gives us this time. Negative 36, it is still the exact same thing. So instead of negative 4 plus or minus 6i over negative 2, we now have 4 plus or minus 6i over 2. Well, when we do the division of 2, we don't have that anymore. Because our 4 divided by 2 is 2, our 6i divided by 2 is 3i, and our 2 divided by 2 is 1. We're done. So really having that a term be positive, not so much 1, but just positive, makes this work out nicer. We don't have to deal with that negative in the bottom of the fraction. Questions on this here? We're ready for the last part of 3.6. And that's dealing with the discriminant. The discriminant is this b squared minus 4ac. Now the key thing with this here is this part, the b squared minus 4ac. I'd be making sure to write this down here. Because there's 3 things that happen with the discriminant. The first is that the b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. And if it is, we get 2 real solutions. We also have the case of b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0. We have 1 real solution. And really we could say 1 real unique solution. We saw that today when we got the 2/5 and 2/5. We do have 2 solutions. They're just not unique. They're the same number. So we have 1. And the last case that we have is that b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, like the one we just had. And I call it 2 complex, 2 imaginary solutions. Same thing as this here, because we're only going to have one of these 3 cases. We're either going to have 2 real solutions, 1 real solution, or 2 complex solutions. And it's all based off what the value of b squared minus 4ac is. Questions on this here? We good with this here? Okay. So we want to find the value of the discriminant and describe the number and type of solutions that we have. Okay. Now the first one is this here. Now our value, again, with these here, we still have to get them equal to 0 and go from there. X squared minus 6x plus 10 is equal to 0. Well, our value of a is what? 1. The value B is -6, and C is 10. So finding the value of the discriminant, we just need the value of b squared minus 4ac. Well, our value of b is -6 squared minus 4 times our a value times c. All right, we're going to plug it in. Minus 4 times 1 times 10 is -4. So the value of the discriminant is -4. Now, is that greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? Less than 0, so what do we have? 2 complex Did we find the discriminant? Yes, -4. Did we find the number of solutions that we have? Yeah, we have 2. What type are they? Complex. That's it. Questions on this here before we move on to the next one? We feel good about this here. Now, one thing I would say on this here, make sure to put parentheses around that b squared, because especially if it's negative, it'd give us a different answer. Now, the next one, x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Well, a is 1, b is -6, and c is 9. B squared minus 4ac. All right, so we'd have -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. And again, at this point, we'll type it in, parentheses, -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 is 0. So since the discriminant is equal to 0, we have what? One real solution. We ready for the last one here? X squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So our b squared minus 4ac. -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. Anybody have a guess at what this is going to be? Yeah, 4. Is indeed 4. So we have 2 real solutions. Questions about the discriminant and how we determine the number and type of solutions that we have? We good with this here? Do we need to see another example of finding the discriminant, number, and type of solutions? We feel good with this here. All right. In that case, your homework assignment is 6 through 16 even and 21 through 24 all.